I'd like to introduce Karen Page and Andrew Dornenburg to a talk today where we're going to talk a little bit about their new book, which is in front of me, Kitchen Creativity. But this is also their 11th book, and I've been using your books for multiple years as inspiration from when I was first cooking, but also now to help provide inspiration to our chefs in our units around the world at Google. So thank you first for being here and making time to see us. It's a true pleasure. But a little bit about our authors before we dive into the book, and we would like to make this a kind of a conversation. So as you have questions that come up, typically we'll leave them to the end, but if there's something that you have a tidbit you really want to get out there, please let us know. We'd love to make this a conversation. And we're going to do a quick interview, and then we're going to break into what we do at Kitchen Sink, which is our teaching kitchen. We're going to do some cooking, and Chef Dee Dee and the team are going to put together a delicious treat. And you will get to sample it, so that's always a plus. So a little bit about our authors. So for Karen on my right here, after skipping a grade, Karen received her letter of admissions to Northwestern University at age 16. The first person...
You're not going to do the whole thing.
No, not the whole thing.
My life story is flashing behind me.
I know, right?
Before my eyes.
But you were the first person to attend college, self-financed your education with 7 academic scholarships. Super cool. You ran your own birthday cake delivery business. Love to hear more about that later on. You were awarded a BA in economics and certified in the women's studies from Northwestern University in '83. Named one of 6 honorable mentions in Glamour's Top 10 College Women Competition and featured on the cover of Newsweek. As well, you were invited to the White House twice back in '86. You also earned an MBA from Harvard Business School. Northwestern named you in '93 one of the university's 100 leading professional alumni. Congratulations.
Council of 100.
Right
Go
on.
Wildcats.
An avid meditator. You both like to run. Interesting to hear that. And you live in New York City with your husband, to your right, Andrew. So welcome, Karen. It's great to have you here. And Mr. Andrew grew up in the Bay Area here. Great to see another Bay Area individual. And you kind of transitioned from farmland to suburbs. So your family's background and backyard had a lot of trees. You were obviously into gardening and kind of it led you into the culinary world where you started cooking at a young age. And you were mentioned as first cooking at McDonald's in your early years.
Absolutely.
As well as one of the few, like Jeff Bezos and others, that also worked at McDonald's, doing quite well now from McDonald's. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, everyone has their start somewhere. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
3 days out of high school, you became a firefighter. So obviously with the amazing devastation in Northern California with the fires lately, it's great to see that you were putting in your dues early on, but at the same time you found that after a while, firefighting was, even though it was your best day of putting out fires and cooking for the team, your best days ahead were really getting into the kitchen. So you became a chef, you worked in some amazingly talented restaurants, worked under some top chefs, and then after deciding to leave the kitchen, so you worked with Lydia Shire for a while, decided to leave the kitchen, and then ended up putting together some amazing books that we're going to talk about in a moment. You also earned your SOM certificate, interesting tidbit. And
actually, we both did.
Yes.
Yes.
At the same time?
No.
Different times, but I think it's an important part of anybody's culinary education.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Worthwhile.
And then interesting piece as well is you followed was it your grandmother's love for photography?
Indeed. My grandmother actually had a dark room, which you probably have no idea it is, but it was a place where you developed film, which you probably have no idea what that is either, but there was a time where that happened. Yes. So I followed
and so you did all the photographs for the book, is that correct?
Yes.
For this one.
For this one and Veg Flavor Bible.
Yeah, that's great. So multi-talented individuals here in the room.
Indeed.
So it's my distinct pleasure and total excitement. I can't say it enough. We talked and had coffee for the last hour and how excited I was to see you guys here. Please welcome our authors.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I have to interject by saying, first of all, Scott, thank you for that amazing introduction. I was worried we were going to be here for hours if you're starting out at age 16, but that was lovely. But the reason that we're here is actually because of this man. And I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him in person before, but we have been email touch and in virtual touch ever since he gave this wonderful interview to this national magazine where he mentioned one of our books as his favorite book, which we actually got to see today, which was thrilling. I think it's bound together. What were you describing with butcher string?
Yeah, so
kind of falling apart a little bit.
this is priceless. So if anyone tries to take this from me, good luck. This is the first edition Culinary Artistry, and it is in the same condition as it was 17 years ago when you signed it. It was literally signed in 2000, and it was a book that I used for inspiration on a day-to-day level when I was writing menus. And we're going to talk about how chefs gain their inspiration and how culinarians and even home chefs, home cooks gain their inspiration. And there's such a variety of techniques in becoming creative. But this book is something that's very near and dear to me. And when I brought it out to Andrew when he was dining at our restaurant, I humbly said, it's getting used, as you can see, because the binding's falling off. So my only feedback for the publisher is a stronger binding here, because the butcher's twine is not quite working.
Or duct tape included in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you talk about inspiration, I mean, part of our inspiration for being here is really Scott and the amazing reputation that Google has for its culinary program. And to know that you've been here for how many years now? 12?
Yeah,
Is it 12
going on
years
12
now?
years, yeah.
That you have helped to have it raise it to really a world-class level. When you started out, there was just, I think, a handful of cafes, and now, there they are all over the world. But for those of us who have never eaten at Google before, this is a first. To know that it is legendary in terms of the choices available, the quality of the food, and now being here at this wonderful new location that we understand just opened a matter of weeks ago, really, it's something that gets us on a plane from New York City to come out to the Bay Area to see what it's all about. And the fact that if we had any role, the most minute role in being an inspiration to you, then we're thrilled to be able to be here and to be here with all the Googlers for the first time. So thank you for having us.
I often talk about your books. Obviously, this has just been released a week ago, so many of you probably haven't got it yet. You're flipping through it. But a lot of your books follow that same theme, which is to really unlock the creativity and the potential in chefs' minds. And again, whether it's a professional chef or whether it's chefs at home. And what I've found that these books are so amazing at is, I always say it's hard to plan to be creative on a specific day. You can book the time in your calendar and say, on Wednesday I'm going to write a menu, but you don't feel well, the weather's bad, something comes up in the news, and you're not feeling it. Tell me how this book is helping chefs and individuals kind of overcome that. There's a lot of great pieces in here, but maybe unpack a little bit of some of the initial thoughts that you put into this book to help chefs and home chefs really kind of get that creative edge and bring their best forward.
Sure. Well, I think it's true that for any of us who cook, whether it's at home or professionally, you're always looking for inspiration. And there's a lot of sameness otherwise that takes place when you're making the same thing day in and day out. So if you can learn to bring creativity to your cooking, it's going to add that much more enjoyment to you, to everybody that you're cooking for and with. But beyond that, it's really a matter of the creativity is the most important skill that we can possibly have. And so if you can learn the skill of creativity from the world's best chefs, what better way to learn it? We had done research on the fact that CEOs are saying that the number one skill for success in leadership and in business is creativity. It's not integrity. It's not global thinking, which is a little interesting. But the fact that it's creativity makes it a subject that's worth studying. And so we also realized that only 1 in 4 people surveyed say that they think that they're at their creative potential. So to the extent that we can become more creative, it's something we can apply to our daily lives. It's something we can apply it in the kitchen. And so what we did with Kitchen Creativity is we wanted to create the ultimate culinary brainstorming tool. So if you want to be more creative, what are some of the things that you can use, some of the best practices that are used by the world's best chefs to become more creative? And really, we map out the process of creativity, which I know we're going to get into, but both in a general way, in terms of culinarily, coming up with a new dish, trying to take old dishes and make them new again, but then also from just a best practices standpoint, how do you let your creativity flow? And we've got some advice from some of the leading creativity experts in the world talking about how to make that happen.
Yeah, so don't downplay that. I think one of the things that got me excited about culinary artistry when I looked at it years ago was the pedigree of chefs you have in your back pocket. I mean, I'm interested to hear how you had formed some of the initial relationship with these chefs. I mean, you're talking about every top chef out there, whether it's Danko, Repaired, Danny Meyer's Restaurateur. You've got amazing chefs that are taking their time to share some of their most intimate secrets on what's made them successful. And I don't take that lightly, and none of our chefs at Google that do such an amazing job in bringing the food program to life here do either. I mean, these are the inspirational chefs that they look to aspire to be. What was some of the initial, how did that happen? Like, what was that first chef that you're like, oh my God, if I could just get this one to, how did that go about?
Well, you know, when we started out, we had never written a book before. And so how do you get the world's best chefs
Right.
to talk to you? We didn't really know. But the ace in our hole was that Andrew was working as a professional chef in Boston. And he was working with Chris Schlesinger and Lydia Shire, who at the time were two of the best chefs in the country, who happened to be in Boston. And so starting out with the two of them, and then he went on to work with Anne Rosenzweig at Arcadia in New York City. Mm-hmm. And once we had the three of them in our pocket, we could kind of go to people because there were three big names that they knew us personally, had some belief that we could actually write a book. And so they thought, well, if Lydia's in and Chris is in and Anne's in, then you know I'm in too. So from there we went to other top chefs in Boston and New York. Mm-hmm. From then we were doing the research on weekends and evenings. We would travel to San Francisco and knock on Gary Danko's door. Actually, you had also worked with Madeline at that point.
I worked with Madeline Kamen up at the School for American Chefs at Behringer Vineyards.
Which is where Gary went, yeah.
So you
met Gary Danko. We met other chefs through her too. But the key is Karen writes a great letter. That's how you do it. She goes, well, we just interviewed these other people. Would you like to be included in our new book? And even though they didn't know us, they knew the other people. It's like, and also asking for 15 minutes. We only need 15, 20 minutes. Right. And that almost always turned into an hour. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, we interviewed the chef Barbara Tropp, a legendary restaurateur chef, China Moon Cafe in San Francisco. And at the end, we talked to her for like almost an hour and a half. She goes, I've never had a conversation like this. And we're like, neither have we. And then she says, well, try not to edit my words too much. We're like, you went to Princeton. You're good. So, you know, like
a PhD in Chinese poetics.
Yes,
she spoke in poetry. Just an amazing woman, founder of the Women Chefs and Restaurateurs Association that we talked about, was near and dear to Dee Dee and myself as a former board member of that. So I think once you kind of get started, then it's easier to get the ball rolling, and that's exactly true of any aspect of creativity. The Goethe quote, it's like, you know, whatever you can imagine, and I won't get the words right, but you know, be bold, take action, and then it really has a magic to it that really starts to unfold. So once you take action in a certain direction, we talk in the book, there's an A to Z section of the book, the back of the book that's laid out like Flavor Bible, if any of you are familiar with that, where it's a 3-column format, A to Z, but instead of flavors, we have apples to zucchini in the Flavor Bible. We have every other topic under the sun, from architecture to
Alice in Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland.
And there's actually a restaurant based on Alice in Wonderland, the book, and we actually finish up with yoga. Rick Bayless of the Frontier Grill and Topolobampo, Restaurant of the Year and the James Beard Award, he's been doing yoga for 20 years. And this is what's fun about knowing these people for so long. It's like, hey, Rick, would you mind, doing a yoga pose for us? So he's in his chef's jacket, and he just pops up on the counter and does yoga for us.
Yeah,
it's just like
he's amazing.
He's like,
and
sure.
For as long as we've known him, because we interviewed Rick Bayless for all of our books, we had never seen him do this amazing pose before. But anyone as multi-talented as Rick, who has been doing yoga for 20 years, it's pretty awesome. So what an inspiration to talk to chefs. And again, when you're talking to chefs for your 11th book as opposed to your first book, it's a whole different ballgame, because you built up a certain level of knowledge and trust. Mm-hmm. And so we were talking to people about what inspires them, and they went a little, rogue with us.
They went there.
Yeah. And could tell us, quite honestly, I look at my ingredients, I talk to my ingredients. And so I'll take an apple and I'll put it in the center of a table, and I'll have a conversation with the apple and say, okay, apple, what are we going to do today? We've done some interesting things before, but what are we going to do today? And that there's this level of intuition, you could call it mediumship, channeling, whatever you want to call it, that takes place. And we're talking about the most respected chefs in the country. So Jose Andres, based in Washington, D.C., will talk to his ingredients. He said, if you talk to your ingredients, they will always tell you a story. You just have to have your ears open to hear that story. Gaia Oliveira, who just won the James Beard Award this year, is the best outstanding pastry chef in the United States. She's the one who puts the apple on the parchment paper in the center of Restaurant Danielle in New York City and says, talk to me, apple. Philip Foss from Ideas in Chicago.
Yeah, Philip Foss, he's great. This is a very fascinating restaurant. It's in a loft way out in the middle of nowhere. They say, take a car, don't take public transportation. But he will say, the ingredient is my child, and I want my child to succeed and be happy. And it's up to me to care for the child and make sure it's physically, emotionally, and mentally and spiritually happy. So he treats his ingredients like their children and raises them, and again has that conversation. And he has the craziest menu I think I've ever seen. He will do a menu based on the 80s. He will produce a dish and play a certain piece of music that it's inspired by.
Madonna's Like a Virgin. He's got a little dish to go with that. He'll serve cocaine, which is basically a lime and coconut powder on a mirror with a razor blade at his Michelin-starred restaurant.
I think our chefs are getting inspired. I hear them giggling.
It's like, he's out there, but he's got a Michelin star. He's respected. Right. He's so celebrated. And so, there are chefs out there who are creative. They're pushing the envelope, and they're doing a lot of things that are a lot of fun. And you might not serve exactly the same things at home, but you can be inspired by the thought process. He does a dish of Frosties and French fries, which was inspired by his daughters. As a single dad for a while and raising his kids, and the babysitter took them to Wendy's where they learned to did anybody do that? Dip their French fries in the Frosties?
I've never heard of that. Yeah.
Did you ever have it in a Michelin-starred restaurant? If you go to Ideas in Chicago, you can taste it there.
So what I love about these books, again, is it caters to a variety of audiences. You've got people that are cooking at home. You've got people that are beginning to cook or learning to cook, or you've got people that have been cooking for many years. And what I love about this, in essence, is it's very similar to our program here, is we're really trying to enable people to pick up skills and give them the confidence. And when you dive into the book, you're going to see that the quotes in here are not only from some of the biggest and baddest names out there, but they're the really great tidbits that really help unpack what they're thinking and their thought process. So let's talk a little bit about the book. So the book is very interesting. This is a book of no recipes. This is a book of, and thank you, because there's a lot of recipes out there, but it's really around a few different aspects. So you start the book around mastery, and so there's a section on that, which I'd love to talk about briefly. And then section 2 is more around alchemy, the transformation stage. And then number 3 is around really that creativity aspect, which obviously is the bulk of it. Can you talk about the 3 different sections briefly, so we can kind of get an understanding of why you went that direction? And then we'll bring in some examples.
Sure. Well, we start out with mastery because, as Picasso lets us know, you can't break the rules unless you know what the rules are. So you start out by understanding the rules, and the way to do that is really to learn to think like a chef, shop like a chef, and season like a chef. And so in terms of thinking like a chef, we have done lots of research on the leading books that chefs everywhere say that you should have in your culinary library at home, and we've narrowed it down to the 20 top books. And if you read these books, if you really absorb that information, you're going to know what the best chefs know, and that will give you a starting point in terms of knowledge. In terms of skill, you want to learn to, well, actually one other thing that's important with chefs is the shopping aspect. This shopping is a skill that if you aren't willing to invest in the same level of ingredients that the best chefs work with, you're not going to have the same results. Sometimes the hardest part is figuring out where do you buy it. And chefs have already done that hard work for you to find the very best of the best ingredients. We have a list of the purveyors that provide chefs with some of the hard to find ingredients, spices, herbs, seasonings.
Lots of grains too.
Yes.
Yeah, lots of grains and flours. They want their polenta milled a certain way, or their flour milled a certain way.
So we've got a guide to where to shop like a chef. And then in terms of seasoning like a chef, I mean, that's really what we were talking about it in culinary artistry so many years ago, when we banished chefs to a desert island and asked them to bring only 10 ingredients that they would cook with for the rest of their life. The number one ingredient was salt. And salt is really the master technique. All the chefs in the room are nodding their heads like, yes, of course. But to learn to add sodium to a dish in a way that enhances flavor without necessarily adding flavor, which we get into in the alchemy stage of things. But it gets a little more complicated than above and beyond the Flavor Bible. We talk about different elements of salt. So not just which salt do different chefs use. Some use sea salt, some use mine salt, some use pink salts. There are different salts for different purposes, and thinking more specifically about the salt you use, adding not only sodium, but in some cases umami through a salty ingredient, or other ingredients that are complex that will add more than one taste at once. If you learn how to work with them, it can really elevate your cooking. We talked to one chef the other night in New York City. We did an event, and he was talking about the fact that he actually ran out of salt, which was like the first chef I've ever heard of. But it happens. We're all
I've never heard that before.
That's the exact reaction everybody had.
Because your
eyes just went like this,
maybe
like,
he wouldn't
what?
run out of it at the restaurant, but at home. But he opened up his refrigerator at home, and he had feta cheese there. So he took the liquid from the feta, which is salty, and he used that as sort of a liquid salt ad hoc. And only, it's just one of those things that it's like, well, of course you could use salty ingredients. It doesn't have to be salt. And I think part of what kitchen creativity is all about is how can you open your mind to thinking not about specific ingredients, but think about concepts that you're adding to a dish and to use it and really extrapolate from there.
It's interesting to think through the whole aspect of just seasoning, because people think, oh, you just add salt and it's done. Well, there's types of salt. There's layering, when to add the salt, when to add it in the beginning and the end of cooking. And these are the tips that are within the book that really help a good chef become a great chef, and a great chef become an excellent chef, whether, again, you're a home chef or not. So the first stage is mastery, and you made it very clear that, and all the chefs said this in the book, that to be able to master anything, it's a lot of practice, it's a lot of discipline, it's a lot of time. And once you understand the rules, then you can attempt to break the rules. And then I think it kind of takes you to that next step. So talk a little about the next section, which is around that transformation, that alchemy stage.
Well, that's the stage that we've really been writing about and talking about for years now under the guise of culinary artistry, the Flavor Bible, and what to drink with what you eat. So alchemy is really about how do you take something common and turn it into something precious. And what we mean by that is that there is a benefit in the culinary world that 1 + 1 doesn't just equal 2. There are instances in which 1 + 1 can equal 3 or more. And what we have dedicated our research to over the years is trying to identify what is the lock that you can put, the key that you can put into the lock to really turn it to unlock the deliciousness of particular ingredients, whether they're herbs or spices or other seasonings for specific ingredients, or, and this is what led us both to the sommelier school, is realizing that if you've got a perfect plate of food in front of you and you've got the wrong wine in your glass, when you have the two together, which you inevitably do because you eat and drink together, it's going to clash, it's going to ruin the food. So we became committed to studying wine and earning our sommelier certificates because it was so important to it was an important way to master flavor, and that was the best means that we had to be able to train our palates and to learn more about, well, what was the secret to matching the best wines with food. And so we also interviewed dozens of the best sommeliers all across the country, including at some of the top restaurants and people that you're well acquainted with, and really compiled that into What to Drink with What You Eat, which is the ultimate food and wine pairing guide, because you can look up the food, it will tell you what wine or beer, spirits, cocktails, water, coffee, tea, etc., to drink with it to enhance the flavor of that food. Vice versa, if you're starting with a bottle of wine, you're starting with a beer, you're starting with something else, what food can you serve with it to best enhance what's in the bottle or what's in the glass? And so when you bring all of those elements together, that's what we're talking about in terms of alchemy. If you master some of the principles of what are the key flavor pairings, what are the key, some of those standard, Sancerre and oysters, or Pinot Noir and salmon. If you master some of those, it gets you so close to the ballpark that you could actually be only an okay chef with a modicum of talent. But if you understand those principles and can apply them in the kitchen, it's going to make you shine to a whole new level.
Yeah, and we always think about what's in the glass as a sauce also. And again, a really easy way to do that, a quick tool, is if it grows together, it goes together. So if you're in Italy and you're making pasta from northern Italy, see what they drink in northern Italy. If you're in the Bay Area and you're grilling a steak, well, gosh, grab a bottle of Zen. They're right there in Napa Valley. They're all next to each other. There's a natural synergy. But also, I think it's also fun and just to wrap this part up a little bit, is that it's not just wine. You can have a lemon soda with a salad, and that could almost be your dressing on a salad. So you think outside just the classic pairings, and like we all know that You can actually drink, white wine with many things. You can actually drink red wine with fish now. It's okay. Pinot Noir and salmon. So think, of all the beverages and what you can bring in. And again, that's going to change a lot of your meals just by having the proper beverage. That's the three there.
I think you hit on a lot of key points, and it goes much deeper than just the actual dish itself. It goes to what's being paired, your surroundings, and it creates that experience that if any of you think about your most epic food experience you've ever had, it could be a hot dog at a ballpark, it could be at a Michelin star restaurant. There's different things that all came together, and
Absolutely.
A great culinarian makes that look so easy. And
Exactly.
a lot of these tips are in the book, and so
Yes.
it's super, super exciting. There's a great quote in the book, and it starts off by saying, to not copy other chefs, but to be able to get inspired. I and many others feel that copying is actually the gateway to get into. Can you speak to that? Because it's kind of a contradiction, but it actually makes total sense.
Yes, well, that's sort of the hook in the beginning of the book is talking about we want to teach you creativity. What's the definition of creativity? It's not copying, coming up with something that's new and useful and surprising. And yet, by definition, how do you get to that point of being able to do it? You need to learn the rules. How do you learn the rules? You copy. So that's the, push me, pull you. And I think that is a lesson that comes through time and time again in the book, and that it's never one or the other. It's never hot versus cold. It's both and. And we talk in the back of the book under why, you'll find yes and being one of the key rules that you need to master for creativity. And if it's the first rule of improvisation, if you've ever done any improvisational acting, you know that if someone says something like, okay, here's the premise of this scene. I'm going to walk in and, I dropped the book on the floor. You don't say, oh, no, you didn't drop the book. You have to say, yes, you dropped the book, and that was the book that I was on the wait list for at the library. It's like, yes, and that was the book that my ex-boyfriend actually wrote, and you add on to the story. So you always add on to it because you never want to break that chain. So the key that you can take from the improvisational rules and to apply in the kitchen is no matter what happens, you trust that it's there to serve you and it's for a reason. And what we tell people is it kind of goes, if you look at in the beginning of the book, there's a list of different classic dishes and what their origins were. And a lot of times they came from mistakes. So there was something that went wrong. The burrito gets knocked into the deep fat fryer. Hey, chimichangas. Or the ravioli gets knocked into the deep fat fryer. Hey, toasted ravioli turns into a thing. People love it. Yeah. So things are never really mistakes that if you pay attention to it. And so at Craftsman and Wolves in San Francisco, the intern undercooks the egg that you asked her to hard boil. It's soft boil. It oozes out. Wait a second, that's kind of cool. And you find out that people love things that ooze out of other things.
You just let all the secrets out of our mistakes in these conversations. Thanks, Karen.
Mistakes.
It's a really good point. I think Fran Andrea talks in the book about the fact that if you're unique and if you're doing something innovative that no one else has done before and you're not copying, then no one can really judge it against anything else. And I think that's a good point, but you cannot go that direction unless you've got the understanding of the technique and the mastery to begin with. And obviously Fran is one of the most acclaimed chefs out there, and so he can easily pull that off. But I think it's a great testament to get inspired by seeing what other people do, have conversations. Whatever your inspiration is to document it. And you have a lot of great tips in the book around how do you capture that moment of creativity. It's about always being positive. It's about surrounding yourself with others on great conversations. It's about writing things down. And, most chefs, great chefs, have either a pocketbook, a pen, a notebook in the back, or right by the bedside, because when you wake up, sometimes you've had this amazing thought. Or for me, it's if I exercise. It's like I get that aha moment of that would work. And then you have to write it down. And it's about all these great little tips that sometimes are not revolutionary. It's just, yes, this makes total sense. Let's do this more often. And you can take that outside the kitchen as well.
Yes, and that was one of the benefits of being able to do book number 11 is because chefs were really upfront with us about their creative process involving, in a lot of cases, personal reflection time. So whether that was through journaling or through meditation, we found out that a lot of the chefs we've been talking to for years were very deep meditators. We talked with Eric Ripert of Le Bernardin, which is on the world's 50 best restaurants list, about his Tibetan Buddhist meditation practice that he credits as a source of his creativity. Mario Batali was studied TM after being recommended to it by Jerry Seinfeld, of all people. And so he studied through the David Lynch Foundation. And other chefs are big meditators, yoga doers, martial artists, runners.
A lot of
because
runners.
for those of us who are runners, like Andrew and I have run marathons, when you're doing 26.2 miles, it's all mental. It's not physical anymore.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's a grilling
involved.
business. It's very, very,
Yes.
you bring out all your senses when you're cooking. How many people here love to cook at home?
All right.
Yay.
Everyone here.
Our kind of
you're
peeps.
going to be so more inspired now with this book. But it brings out all of it, and it's very draining. It's very emotionally draining, sometimes more than even physically draining, depending on what you're doing. And I think that whatever you need to do to create that balance is going to keep you at your best, so that you can be at your best consistently. Because we're human, and if we're not feeling creative, that speaks in the food. You can see it, you can smell it, you can taste it, or you can't, right?
Emily Lochetti calls that the aura of a dish, where that the most important aspect of the dish is that connection between the dish itself and the person who's eating it.
Sure.
And she believes it's love, that you can actually taste it if there's soul in a dish, if there's love in a dish, or if there's not. If a dish falls flat, she knows that people just aren't cooking with everything that they can bring to a dish.
Sure. So we're going to do a transition here, and speaking of bringing everything that we can to a dish, we're going to do a little fun here with Chef Didi and the team. So we're in the kitchen sink teaching kitchen at Google in Sunnyvale, and the team here is going to talk through, we're going to move the chairs out, they're going to talk through kind of how they look at inspiration when they create meals and recipes for our Googlers as they teach them to cook. And we'll be kind of narrating back and forth and asking her all sorts of questions and seeing how it comes to life. But we're excited for this. So Chef Didi, welcome.
Great.
Let me get out of your way.
Yay.
All right. So, tell the audience here, and obviously our virtual audience, a little bit about what you do and what Kitchen Sink is. For the folks in the audience, they probably understand it, but you're delivering cooking classes to Googlers,
Yes,
sometimes families,
sometimes families.
and you're teaching people on a variety of spectrum, whether they know how to cook, they're comfortable with cooking, or not at all.
Yep. Sometimes we have people that cook 6-7 nights a week. Sometimes they're just getting into the kitchen and they want some basic knife skills, some basic cooking techniques. So we have full culinary program, single subject classes, could be food literacy based, skill building. We do a core culinary program, lots of team events, guest chefs. So usually 2 classes a day. Or more.
You do have the coolest job on campus.
Yeah, I get to live in this amazing space each and every day.
And you're in a brand new teaching kitchen here. So I'm going to move the chair out of your way. And why don't you just talk a little bit? I know I have a kind of an understanding of what you're looking through here, but I was talking to Karen and Andrew earlier about what I call the chef's arsenal. And the chef's arsenal for many chefs is, especially in the older days when we were trained, is you've got sugar, you've got salt, you've got fat, whatever that fat might be. And those are the 3 things that typically deliver flavor. And we still use those, but we use them a lot more thoughtfully. We have a very intentional outlook on the food program at Google, and while we want to deliver on deliciousness, I love the fact that you said that and it's in the book, we want to deliver on deliciousness, we can do this in thoughtful ways. And so you're going to talk through your dish today and kind of how you're doing that with the Google twist, and talk through some of the ingredients that are your modern day arsenal that are still delivering on the attributes of sweet, sugar, salty, and fat, but you're doing them in a thoughtful way.
So one of the things I think about when I'm building out a dish, start with seasonality. I think that's really important. And thinking about the dish today, I just was thinking about all these amazing fall squashes that are coming into the market. So roasted up some butternut squash. We have some delicata squash roasted as well. And then thinking about other ingredients that would go well with this dish. So some nice kale, mushrooms, and not only mushrooms, roasted mushrooms. So some roasted shiitake mushrooms really get into super tasty, salty, umami for sure.
So you're talking about roasting a lot, and for those who can't see the ingredients up close, you're developing a heightened sense of the flavor by the caramelization of the natural sugars in the squash. In the mushrooms, you're extracting the water to get more flavor. And so you're really delivering on flavor. And most of this, if not all of it, is all plant-based. And so you're highlighting the seasonality. As we're heading into fall, we have some of the squashes here, but you've got some staples that are always on our menus, whether it's the quinoa or the mushrooms and things like that.
roasted shallots as well. So yeah, really nice plant-based dish. One of the things we also drive in kitchen sink as well. And then thinking about, you could take this set of ingredients, and then I think about, okay, how am I going to build flavor with a sauce or the dressing or the sparkling water or the wine, right? So today I wanted to take a kind of a trip and a map to Thailand and use some Thai ingredients.
Oh, excellent.
So things like fish sauce, right? Salty, umami. It's that layer of salt that's not just salt.
Right.
But,
Some caramelization
right?
too, with a lot of flavor in there.
Soy sauce, another, fermented sauces, fermented flavors, really rich in umami. Palm sugar, a little bit of sweet, but also just
Balance.
not, right?
Yes.
Kind of caramely, vanilla-y, not just that plain white sugar thing happening out there. Fresh ginger, or classically for Thai galangal root. Thai chilies, a little bit of that heat and that sensory that you want.
I'm already
going on
hungry.
there.
I know, I am too.
I'm going to pause you right now because what you've delivered on so many attributes that are so important to any great meal, and obviously within our guidance that we provide to our chefs, we have a saying called flavor rules. Flavor rules, it has to be there, or why bother? Just go home, pack it up. But there's also rules of flavor, and what Dee Dee's talked about is you've got amazing flavors here, and they happen to be plant-based. They don't have to be. You've got umami, that sixth sense of that meatiness through mushrooms, soy sauce. You've got the spice through ginger. You've got spice through sriracha or chili. You've got the herbaceousness from the cilantro. You've got the crunch from the nuts. You've got all these different aspects that for a dish to truly be craveable, for you to want one more bite, you need to get all of these elements together. And what Dee Dee is going to do now is to pull these together in a way that is going to want the diner to go back for that next bite. And as our focus here, where we're trying to help our users make better choices with food, because the food here is something that is plentiful and bountiful, it's easy to make wrong decisions. And our job is to make it easier for you to make better choices and to enjoy what you had, because a lot of times users come to us and say, this is the highlight of my day. Lunch was like the highlight.
Yes.
So it should be an amazing experience.
That's great.
Right? Hopefully, like no one's saying no.
Look at all the smiles out there. Yes.
So Dee Dee, why don't you
nodding.
dive in, and if there's audience has questions, you guys can chime in while Dee Dee starts putting this together.
You picked some of my favorite compliments to. I love this combination of squash and mushrooms, the earthiness balancing the sweetness of the squash. I think it's still seasonal, and yet there's a real complementary nature to that.
And actually, the other thing I like is the fact that the nuts will add crunch, but also it's protein and it's fat. So when you were talking about fat being playing a role, and it still does, and fat is actually soon to be considered a flavor, but that's a good way to make the dish even healthier, as opposed to like a creamy dressing or something like that. You can get it all there, so you're actually getting 2 for 1. Actually, a little bit of umami too. So that's a really key thing. And who doesn't like crunchy nuts? It's like
Well, you know how we were talking about earlier, that kind of stealing, that taking advice. I did check out the book, of course, before you got here, and I saw the mushroom advice, and I was like, right, I got to put the mushrooms in there. So thank you.
There you go. You obviously read well, paid attention. And of course, quinoa, with its high protein content, I always feel virtuous when I have it. I love the texture. It's more of a textural thing for me, I think, than flavor. But I love the earthiness of it.
Like you did the
knowing
red
that I'm doing something, good for my body.
Right.
Yes.
So there's a beautiful array of colors. For those that are up here, you can smell it. And it's a cold dish, so imagine if some of these were heated, and you could easily add warm mushrooms or warm squash. And temperature plays a lot into what we do as we're creating dishes, because you eat with your eyes first, but even before that is if you walk into any cafe or restaurant, the first thing you generally get is a smell of something, and hopefully it's something that's not overpowering like cologne or perfume, which is why chefs don't wear. Yeah, it's beautiful. Which is why chefs don't wear that.
Right.
So refreshing.
One of the things that I'd love Dee Dee to speak to is the disciplines within the program at Google about really practicing your recipes. I mean, this is something that you've made before. It's not something that you see on Top Chef where you get 5 ingredients, you put something together, and it's perfect day one. And the reason I mention that, and I love the TV shows that have really brought the popularity of food and getting more people excited, but at times I think there's challenge out there that a lot of people think that just throwing ingredients together is the way it is for chefs, and that's not the case. They spend so much time testing and training and retesting and retooling, and what we call a signature recipe might take us weeks, months, or years to get to a point. And talk a little bit about your thought process on how you got this, because I know you just didn't go in the refrigerator and be like, that looks like fun today. I mean, you had some thought with this, so give us some insights as you're compiling this, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, back to seasonality, deliciousness, craveability, super important. And so, going back to, roasting the butternut squash, thinking about the fish sauce, all those fermented things. I'm actually surprised I didn't put miso paste on this because I'm obsessed with miso paste right now.
It's always better with miso, or
Right.
often better with miso. Great
So
magic
throw
ingredient to
a little
have in
bit of
there.
miso into a salad dressing, or adding it into a dish.
And I love what you said about roasting the squash, because again, every ingredient also has a key that unlocks it in terms of technique. You don't boil it, you don't steam it, you roast it to get the ultimate flavor.
Yeah, great point. Adding in the crunch with some of the red bell peppers and also a little bit of sweetness. We roasted the shallots as well. Another tip I
Concentrate
stole
the
from the
flavor.
book. So, and then we balance tastes, right? The sweet, the sour, the salty, the bitter, and the umami.
It's like chef's favorite two words: need
Right.
salt.
Yeah.
I think even in the book, people you joke that chefs can look at a dish and say it needs salt, and 9 times out of 10 they're right.
Yeah.
So you're about to put this together, and obviously
Yep.
the team is, and right now Jared's tasting to ensure that the salt is spot on.
But that's good.
But it's so key. How many people here have cooked at home, and there's always there's that one little element missing, right? It could be salt, it could be acid, it could be that balance, and that's the fun in the kitchen, is to come up with what is that perfect balance that you're looking for. And what Dee Dee's got here is a perfect opportunity to deliver on amazing deliciousness, because you've got all that going on. But with Thai food specifically, it's either really good or really wrong, right? Because if you're too high on the sugar, if you're too high on the spice, it just throws the balance off.
Right.
And so what she's doing now is she's going through and she's looking for those specific balances in incorporating the ingredients. How's it tasting?
It's good.
Do you need Dee Dee to check that? You sound kind of confident.
I think with the sweetness, sweetness gets a bad rap, that you don't want to eat
Right.
too much sugar, which I think is true. But also sometimes all you need is a little bit of sugar to be a flavor enhancer, and there's that peak aspect of when you're looking how to season, where you learn, okay, it's enhancing flavor, enhancing. Oops, it starts dulling flavor. And so if you add too much sugar, it will dull the flavor. So you kind of have to work on getting to the peak of that apex as it's still going up, and then before it starts going down. And I think that's just a matter of trial and error, repetition, as you said before.
Personal taste.
Personal taste in some
Absolutely.
instances. Yeah.
And that's a challenge. So personal taste, obviously, with hundreds of thousands of Googlers running around, our approach on that is to create food that is approachable for everyone, but personalizable for everyone as well. And so a lot of the times we'll leave garnishes on the side purposely so that people can add their element of acidity, spice, etc.
Yeah.
And I find myself doing that more and more when I cook at home, is because everyone has different tastes. So a question for both of you: if you had 3 ingredients that are always in your refrigerator that you would rely on for
I love
instant
that
flavor.
question. And it always changes,
It
right?
might change.
Miso
It
is
changes.
absolutely
And it changes
one of
during the
them.
season, too.
We have to have miso. Well, champagne. I don't know about that ingredient. But we just always need
All right,
champagne.
we'll add that as the
We're in
fourth.
alignment.
Is that as pretty
We're in alignment.
Right.
Champagne is
I'm getting
very
that
important.
sense.
It is always in the refrigerator.
What else?
Miso, Parmesan cheese.
Yes.
Parmesan is a real workhorse. Because
Actually, we
it
ate
goes so many
vegan
places.
for 2 months.
Yes.
And we found that it was really hard to live without Parmesan cheese.
Yeah, why would you want to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, miso Parmesan. So I'm picking up 2 umami.
Champagne.
Champagne.
And then, actually, not in the refrigerator, but on the next to the stove, as I always have a wide variety of vinegars: champagne, sherry, balsamic, white balsamic, dark balsamic. And what's cool about vinegars, and I think this is if you want to be more creative tonight, buy a different bottle of vinegar, make your same salad, and do one with balsamic vinegar tonight, one with a squeeze of lemon tomorrow, and one with champagne vinegar the next day. You'll have 3 completely different salads. And also, vinegars have different degrees of acidity too. So champagne vinegar is very soft. Lemon's relatively soft. So we always have a lot of vinegar. So it's sort of basically salt, sour.
Actually, in Saison sauce.
Oh, in Saison
Joshua
sauce.
Skeen's Saison. We got a little bottle of that after
How many
we
people
left.
are feeling inspired to cook tonight? Just a few?
The thing is that if you have those key ingredients, whatever they are, and I think it changes from week to week because we don't like having the same thing every night. So some nights it's like, okay, we better have rice and beans and avocados because that'll get us in the Mexican realm. We want to have a good salsa on hand, either a fresh pico de gallo or a great jarred salsa, and just being able to throw those elements together very quickly so that you can eat in a different country every night of the week if you've got, or every week you can sort of shake it up if you want to use over some leftovers. But when we are in a pasta mood, we want to have pasta on hand. We'll want to have pesto. We love the combination of pasta, pesto, white beans. If it's one of those 10, 15-minute meals that you boil up the pasta. Sometimes even authors who write about food don't want to be that ambitious to do
sometimes we want a
recipe that
15-minute
takes an
dinner.
hour. You just want something, okay, I want something delicious and want it in 15 minutes.
Right.
The combination of the pesto and white bean and pasta is a staple. And then we throw in some greens because you want to have some nutritional value in there.
Yes,
So
actually
a great
spinach is a huge
good one.
workhorse in our kitchen. Because spinach can go into a pasta, it can go into a salad.
It could go into a curry.
And it's so funny because when I was
Yes.
looking at this, really what made this dish special is the fact that you decided
Smell
to take
that.
it to Thailand.
It smells great.
But if I looked at these ingredients,
Beautiful. Yeah.
I could easily turn this into chili. This would be my chili at home. Squash, greens, mushrooms,
Beans.
beans, and you can go to a completely different place. So the question we'll use at night is like, well, what country do I feel like being in tonight? And sometimes it's a split because one of us is researching one thing and one of us is researching the other thing. It's like, well, we have to have couscous because I've been reading about Moroccan food all day.
Yeah.
It's like couscous. Why would you want couscous? You need noodles tonight. But that's just an easy question to ask yourself. It's like, what country do I want to be in? And then it's like, okay, then you go in and grab everything you have at home.
Super fun, super fun. So Dee Dee is plating the demonstration plate up, and the team behind you is going to plate up the samples. What I'd like to do now is to open it up to any questions that we might have while the authors are here and finishing up the plate up, and then we'll have a quick sampling, and then we'll do a book signing after that. So if there are initial questions, just start raising your hands. If not, I'll just keep gabbing because I don't have this opportunity often. Yes?
My question is, so this is quite a beautiful, nice, big book. So any suggestions of should we just start at the beginning and go to the end, or are there parts where you're like, it's okay to kind of flip over?
It's totally meant to be.
It is designed.
Flipping through it, you flip through A to Z. Anything that catches your attention, it catches your attention for a reason. I think flipping through it is the absolute best way to read the book. You can read it chronologically. It's laid out in a chronological manner, but you don't have to. I would say pick it up whenever you need inspiration, and we wrote it to be there for it when you do.
So the question, just to repeat it for the audience that are on video, is there a starting point in the book? And I think you captured it great. There could be, but there doesn't have to be. And I think that would be the same for many of the books that you have. I literally was in culinary artistry just a few days ago, not because of the fact you were here, but I had some questions just around ingredients I needed to write for a menu for the Montana event. And I needed a little inspiration, and I was not feeling creative at the moment. I'm like, help me, Karen, help me, Andrew. And so you can definitely use those books at any time as resources. And I think what you're going to find in this one is you can do that even more so because there's so much good stuff in here with all the chef tips, the quotes. Amazing. Additional questions from the audience? In the front, and then we'll go to the back. Yes.
Question for Dee Dee. How did you season the roasted vegetables?
How did you season the roasted vegetables?
Yeah, just a little bit of olive oil and salt and pepper, so it's really simple. That way you could really take this base dish here in a variety of directions. So if I was feeling more Mediterranean today, I could have done lemons and feta or Parmesan and or some champagne vinegar, maybe some basil. So keeping your sort of my core roadmap simple. Plus we have leftovers. Today's Thai, Tomorrow can be
Exactly.
Mediterranean,
Yes.
and it's like a whole new dish.
That's how we
So-
season at home for the
That's what we
exact
do.
same
Right.
reasons. You want the flexibility if you want to be in a different country the next day. If you season it up front with something that's very identifiable with a specific cuisine, you're going to stay in that country the next day and the next day
But the
until
other
you use
thing
it up.
we do at home, is we never call it leftovers. We call it encores. We're having an encore. It's like, oh, we are. It's like, yeah, you just sell it a little bit, you know. But I think
Planned
that makes it
overs,
more
right?
fun.
Planned overs.
Planned overs.
Planned overs.
Yeah.
What's really interesting to add to your question is I know what you're getting at, which is, what do I need to do to get to that end result? And, you could use butter, you could use oil, it doesn't really matter at this point. You obviously chose oil because it's neutral and it's a little lighter fat. But what you've done really well in this is the technique. You've found a way to dice these in a way that they're consistent size, so they're going to cook evenly. You found a way to brown them off so that they still have texture and caramelization, but they're not mushy nor are they crunchy.
Right.
These are the things that make or break a great meal and take a little bit of time to think through. But nice job on that. There was a question in the back, and we're going to repeat the question just so we can get it on.
So I was wondering how you approach research.
So what's the entire process
What's
like?
the entire process when it comes to the research for our books, and this one in particular? For this book we had both a bottom-up and a top-down approach, where the bottom-up approach was basically talking to chefs about what they felt was important to know about their creative process, about how they cooked, and all of them have different specialties. So some of them have different countries that they specialize, or different techniques that they specialize in, something that roots their cuisine and makes it different from anyone else's. And so we wanted to understand, from talking to Kyle Connaughton at Single Thread about his influences in working in Japan, and that Japanese sensibility that he brings to his food in conjunction to the crazy stuff that he's doing with Heston Blumenthal, and that he'd learned at El Bulli, working at El Bulli. So he sort of brings it all together in a really interesting way. Other people like Rick Bayless from Frontera Grill in Chicago is much more specialized in Mexican cuisine. And so we wanted to really understand that by talking to Rick. We talked to his chef de cuisine, and we really wanted to understand their approach to thinking about things. And the beautiful thing about it is that when you talk to people who are at the best of the best at what they do, they've been doing it in some cases for decades, and that creativity is reflected in evolution, that their cuisine goes through the evolution of their thought process, where they're designing a new menu and had brainstormed a list of adjectives that best described certain dishes. So they organized their menu not by appetizer, entree, and dessert, but by characteristic. So it shows the level of thought process that they put into it. They also use inspiration of different paintings and different works of art in their restaurant. They will come up with dishes that are a reflection of that. So the research is extensive in terms of speaking to chefs. We also do extensive research on restaurant reviews, trying to understand their restaurants from a local critic's perspective. We review their cookbooks, we review their menus, and then we kind of put it all together and kind of bring it all together. We also studied creativity from the point of view of various experts on creativity. So we spoke to experts like Michael Gell, the author of How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, and The Art of Connection, on how do you really bring those elements of creativity. What are the things that we should be looking for? And he has identified some of the key genius thinking attributes of Leonardo da Vinci. We saw them in the world's most creative chefs. And so I think through that opportunity of really bringing the two together, we saw how chefs were the perfect exemplars of some of the best creativity that's going on in the world today, and to really take a look at their best practices and really try to translate that for anyone, whether it's a professional chef or a home cook, to help you to be more creative when you least feel the inspiration to be creative.
Excellent. So we have one or two more questions. So one thing that I'm taking away from this, and I'm hoping you are as well, is the thought and intentionality, depending on whoever you are that's creating something, is immense. And when you are preparing your next meal, or when you're at a restaurant, I would say when you're preparing your own meal, or someone else is cooking for you, specifically at home, turn off the TV, turn off the distractions, and take a few minutes to really be mindful of the experience that someone else has prepared for you or that you prepared for yourself. And the reason I mention that, and this is in the book as well, is music and other distractions can either enhance or completely detract from the experience. And knowing the thought that went into just something as simple as a salad, and this is not a simple dish, and it was delicious, by the way. that roasted mushroom,
Right? Yes.
that was like the winning hook there that got you to go for the next bite was that mushroom. But think about that as you're creating things, and have a conversation with people when you're cooking for them, because this is what it's all about. And the reason I mentioned turning down the TV is it's so easy just to be mindless and just, it's not dining anymore. It's just kind of feeding, and we all do that at times. But thank you for all the work that you've done here. Was there another couple questions before we line up for signatures? Yes.
So the holidays are coming up, and we have some big, very traditional meals coming up. Do you have any advice for how to inject creativity into those occasions?
Great question. A lot of times it's very personal. I mean, the holidays are times that we typically get together with family or friends, loved ones, and there's a lot of childhood memories that are involved. Andrew and I, our families had different stuffings when we were growing up, so now we have a multiple stuffing celebration this time of year. But a lot of times, there's a sacredness. You don't always want to, creativity isn't always a good thing. Danielle Ballou says if you're making steak free, you let it be steak free. You don't want to get too creative with that. And sometimes there's sacred cows or sacred turkeys when it comes to Thanksgiving that you don't want to mess with. If you want to have a happy Thanksgiving and have it be as peaceful and calm around the table as possible, you don't want to mess with people's favorite dishes. But there are times that you can take what the essence of Thanksgiving is and if you can deconstruct what is it that's important to you. Well, I want to have a pumpkin dessert on the table. It doesn't have to be pumpkin pie. And then you can start playing with it. Okay, am I going to do a pumpkin tart? Am I going to do a pumpkin ravioli? Am I going to make it a side dish? How am I going to play with it? Am I going to come up with a pumpkin cocktail? So you can have, there's a place in New York City where we had a turkey sandwich that was served with a bag of sweet potato chips and a cranberry fizzy drink, and you realize all the flavors of Thanksgiving are right there, but they're in a completely different format. If you can figure out, do the deconstruction of what are the flavors that mean Christmas to you, or Hanukkah to you, or Thanksgiving to you, and narrow them down, and it's like, okay, well, I have to have stuffing, or I have to have gravy, or whatever your thing is. So, sorry?
Or champagne.
Well, always champagne. Always champagne. Right. So you can play with that. We have an exercise in the beginning of stage 3 in the book where we ask you to think about what your 5 favorite childhood dishes were, and to really analyze the information that's packed in there, because we think that all of you know more than you think you know, and it's all packed in your favorite childhood dishes. So if you take a minute and just sort of make a mental note, it's like, oh yeah, my mom's blank, or my grandmother's blank, or my father is blank when he pulled out the grill and made this for me when I was growing up. Figure out what those dishes were, and then think about what made the dish special to you. So for me, it was caramel apples, and you'll see a caramel apple example of different dishes you can make with the combination of apple, caramel, and nuts that are other than a whole apple on a stick. So we've got a salad example, we've got a cocktail example, different desserts, an upscale dessert example, using that same set of flavor affinities or flavor chords, as we call them, but in a whole different way. And if you take that simple example and you apply it to whatever your favorite flavors are, whether it's tomato, basil, and Parmesan cheese, or something completely different, garlic, ginger, and soy sauce, you can take that set of compatible flavors and apply it to a whole host of different dishes, and that will get your creativity going very quickly.
And I would just add one more thing, is that for we'll use Thanksgiving because that's a biggie. When you make your cranberry sauce, take half of it and make it a different way. So have the one that's gonna make everyone happy, Thanksgiving for God's sake. But maybe take another one and look up cranberries and think about cranberries and I think I'll pop some ginger in there, or maybe a little turmeric, or a little orange zest. And that might not be your family's typical one, but then you'll have something new. And we went vegetarian 5 years ago, and we were invited to Thanksgiving. So guess what? I learned how to make mushroom gravy that year. And now, going on 5 years, I'm still working on mushroom gravy. So again, just add, have the classic thing there that makes everyone happy. but then just throw in a couple extra dishes, and like, what's 2 extra dishes at Thanksgiving? You know, so you sort of point it out, like, this is new, you know, and that's also a fun way to do it, because also it'll give you a chance to sort of chill out around Thanksgiving, make something new. You're already in the kitchen anyway, you know, but just do half. You know.
Excellent. Well, I know we're at time. I know there's more questions. What I'd like to do is first give both of you a huge round of applause for coming. Thank you.
Oh, thank